if you want to publish applications that you have been hosting in Azure, then in Azure there's a couple of things that you might be interested in into using for publishing them onto the internet. Um, so what I want to do is I want to start by sort of creating a solution. Let's say in region one, we have decided to run an app service. That means that in Azure, you will have to create an app service plan. The app service plan is the equivalent for a virtual machine. So that app service plan has an operating system. Also, we have been looking at sizing for the app service plan. And then on top of that, we will be running the actual app service, which is considered to be the hosting platform. If the operating system would be Windows, the app service would be Internet Information Services. If the operating system would be Linux, we have Linux-based, well, web servers like Nginx or Apache. And then on top of that, we could be hosting an application, and the application like the Ticketmaster application that we discussed in some occasions. It's just like a full app, and if we are running this application, then this application or the app service plan also might have been connected to a virtual network. So we may have chosen this application service plan to be connecting to a VNet. Maybe for some reason maybe the application also requires access to an actual virtual machine with an operating system of your choice. And maybe on top of that virtual machine, you have been running some kind of other part of the solution. Very common is that you could be running so-called worker processes. For example, if the application requires credit card verification components, you might have the credit card verification component deployed to that virtual machine, for example. This is just an example that we could be thinking of. Now, maybe so if this is the application that we created, then one of the things that we might want to do is we might want to make sure that we can publish this solution in a sort of a more secure way. Now, we have seen application services before, and if you create one, they are always automatically published towards the internet. Even if you haven't deployed any content like the content of the app yet, immediately, right from the start, your app service is available on the internet. However, in that case, the app service is indeed available from the internet, but we don't have we don't have any extra security measures taken. Also, also in larger organizations or maybe for larger applications, you may want to host the solution in more than one Azure region. And those different Azure regions do not even have to be in the same geography. For example, you could have your application hosted, for example, in Norway East as the first region, but you might as well choose another distant region, for example, Southeast Asia, to be the second region for your solution if it happens to be that your users are located at that location. The website of Real Madrid, for example, is an application that for the largest portion runs in Southeast Asia because there is just more people there that check out the website. And it makes sense because, well, there is just more people in Southeast A or in Asia than we have in Europe. So we may have a situation where we basically create an application that is not only located in one region, but it might just as well be located in multiple regions. And actually, if you look at this kind of situations, it is super common, especially because of the internet and international, the easiness of international doing business internationally. Very often, new to deployed applications are from day one a global solution. So therefore, you might need to create your solution in more than one region, or maybe even in more than two regions. So this is just a simplistic form, let's say, just like have two regions. So what if we want to publish our workloads towards the internet? Now, when it comes to publishing workloads, we basically can go into two different stages. One of them is that we could have some regional solutions. And in Azure, we actually have two regional solutions when it comes to publishing resources to the internet. One of them is you can be implementing a load balancer. The full name would be the Azure load balancer. And you could also be using something called an application gateway. Now, the major difference between a load balancer and an application gateway is that the load balancer it can work for pretty much any protocol, where an application gateway is specialized in publishing HTTP based or HTTPS based applications. So if my application would be a web application that I can access over HTTP, then an application gateway would suit better because it comes with all kinds of fancy things it can do for HTTP. For any other type of application, any other kind of protocol used, like maybe if you want to load balance email servers, I don't know, port 25 maybe, or if you want to load balancer your old-fashioned Doom servers, you can also do that. Then the load balancer is the right solution. Now, for both of these components, they are actually also to connect, to connect to your virtual network. So in this case, if I would want to build these things, then whether or not I would be creating a load balancer or an application gateway, they both would be connected to the VNet in order to sort of allow the connection to the app service in that way. And optionally, but that is something that, and it makes sense to do so, you can also have these resources connected to the internet via a public IP address. So we can go in and, well, connect to the gateway or the load balancer from the internet, right? So that's the idea. This is, these are two options that you can take. But as I mentioned, typically these options are what we consider to be regional. However, nowadays we also have some options to publish these kind of things at a global scale. However, we also have some other solutions for that. So in this situation, because I am running my app in two regions, I would basically have to make a decision whether or not I want to have a load balancer or or an application gateway deployed for publishing the components, but I will have to do everything twice because these resources are, well, regional resources. So just like this, we could have either one of those two, and also here we would have to go in and publish these components to the internet. However, and that's where one of the problems comes in. Um, if you have two public IP addresses in two different regions, how are we going to make sure that this user here is going to be connected to to the closest possible region? Because if I live in Asia and there is an instance of my application in Southeast Asia, then I rather connect to that one than the one in Europe because, well, I have to travel less kilometers to get to that application gateway. That means lower latency, which means a better user experience. So, however, there is now in the old-fashioned way, you may have heard of something called DNS round robin, which would mean that there would be somewhere on the internet there is a DNS database. We would be basically going in and say, hey, I have a public IP address 1 for region 1, and I have a public IP address 2 for region 2 that I bind to the same domain name. So let's say my website is moab.ms, right? Then in that case, it will just randomize the results. And then, well, the first user would be sent to region 1, the second user would be sent to region 2. The problem only is if we just randomize it, we are not going to take into account where the user comes from. Now, some internet providers, they also understand that, and they can sort of order the results from, well, to what is best for where the user request comes from. However, um, well, we don't want to rely on that. So in Azure, we also have something called, we have a couple of global solutions. And there's also two of them. In Azure, when we want to do some global scale load balancing, then one component we could implement is the traffic manager. The traffic manager, just like the load balancer, is pretty much supporting any protocol, and it is basically doing a DNS-based redirection activity, which means that, for example, I can have a user. That user would be connecting to a public DNS, and the user could be asking like, hey, I want to go and connect to moab.ms. Then what we can say to DNS is, hey, I'm gonna send moab.ms to the traffic manager, public access component, the FQDN. That is one way, and then the traffic manager is basically going to take into account, hey, where is the user coming from? Which of the public IP addresses of the in the back load balancer or gateway are we going to send back to that user first? So the user will always be connecting to the most local or the nearest instance. That is one way, that is one thing we could do. Another thing we can do is we can implement in Azure something called the Azure Front Door service. The Azure Front Door, just like the application gateway, is optimized for HTTP, HTTPS kind of traffic. And the front door could be acting as a redirector, but it can also act as a reverse proxy where the user connection will then be to the front door, and the front door will then go in and say, hey, I want to go and send you to the right location to keep the the connection and the latency as low as possible. So we do have two of these options. What we could say is that these kind of solutions, because they are global, well, they are highly integrated with the Azure backbone, the component that the Azure network that is spun around the globe. And it comes with all kinds of benefits, especially front door, for example, has some benefits in optimizing the traffic for the user, like enabling compression between the gateway and, for example, the front door itself. Or if you choose to not have a gateway, from the app service to the front door itself, you can do SSL offloading capabilities. You can set up caching. There's, like I mentioned, compression of traffic capabilities here as well. But also one of the, let's say, nicer things that both an Azure front door support and an application gateway support, they optionally, you can add a web application firewall policy to it. And the idea behind this, so we can basically what we can do is we can turn not only the application gateway or the front door into a, well, it's actually a load balancer, but we can now also turn it into a layer 7 firewall, because the application or the web application firewall policy that we can add to the front door or application gateway, it will it will operate at layer 7, and it also comes with a lot of predefined predefined rules to defend or to protect our environments against well-known attacks. For example, there's like a whole bunch of SQL injection attacks it may be recognizing and blocking for us, or it could or detect a whole bunch of PHP kind of attacks, and it will help us protect our environment against those solutions. Now, so this is actually a quite nice way to protect our applications. Now, each of these 4 different components, they have their own specialities. If you want to check them out, one of the things that you can do in Azure is just search for load balancers, and then we have a link here that says load balancing. Help me choose. And if I select this, then I do get a little wizard. Uh, in first, you can go and do a service comparison. So you can see, hey, what kind of protocols are supported. You can see that the application gateway and the front door are HTTP only, where the load balancer and traffic are focusing on TCP UDP, which basically means any other port on top of that. Do you want to allow private load balancing? Yes or no? Global load balancing, as you can see, the load balancer itself could also be configured to be a global load balancer. What kind of routing policies can we do? For example, the traffic manager can do load balancing based on geography. Like, hey, if a user comes from Asia, I want to send that user to an Asian data center in Azure. It can some of them support connection draining, session affinity, TLS offloading. This is only something that the application gateway in the front door can do. Site acceleration for compression and caching stuff. Those kind of things we can run in Azure. These are the 4 options. There's also a couple of tutorials here, so this basically helps you, takes you like into a study mode on how these things works. Or we have a couple of videos here on YouTube, or you can also go and use this little wizard to make your decision. So if we are running an application that is using HTTP or HTTPS, we say yes. What you'll notice, if I click yes here, my load balancer will then be removed from the remaining options. So if I click yes, the load balancer is now gone. Is it public? Yes, it's going to internet facing. Did I deploy it in multiple locations? Yes. And then you have options like, hey, but do you also want to do performance acceleration? And then if I say yes here, my traffic manager is not able to do that. So now my traffic manager is gone. Do you want to implement SSL offloading? Yes. And then based on my answers, I get the suggestion that I'm going to implement the front door service as well as the application gateway at the regional level. And you can actually see it also tells us that it's we have a global layer 7 load balancer, we have a regional layer 7 load balancer, we can set up site acceleration, SSL offloading. If you don't know what that is, we can basically have we can have our HTTPS connection being connected to the front door instead of having the SSL connection all the way back to the application server, which lays more heavy on the application server itself, on the app service. Therefore, you may need more instances of your app service, the more connections you have. But if you have your front door handle all this, the front door will be responsible for doing all the calculations on the CPU, and therefore your app service is going to be less heavily used. Huh. So that is something you could be implementing as well. It also gets you some extra info, links to extra information. This as well. So we have like a nice extra information. One link here is the reference architecture, and this will show you a little bit of an example of how we can see the front door and how we can see, for example, solutions in and region, and how this would be done, and in this example what would be costs that you would be seeing, and some explanation on it. So that is actually quite an interesting way to look at these things. Another thing that you might like is if you search for, if you go to moap.ms, yes, Moap, it's the best website ever, you know. Here in learning, I have created a link that is that there's a link here that is the Azure technology decision trees. If you follow this link, you will be brought to this location, and here we have all kinds of decision trees, and one of them is the when I think about networking, load balancing options. And then if I scroll a little bit further down, we can basically get to see a decision tree on in what situation are you going to choose what kind of solution. And well, one of the nicer things here is that this all these questions, let's say, all these questions are basically the questions that we got when we were running this little wizard, right? So the wizard is basically the decision tree. This is options for publishing your components to, towards the internet. Now, if you want to start with this, let's say if I want to start by creating, for example, a front door, I can just go and say, hey, let's create a front door from where I left the wizard. This will take me to the front door component. In this case, we have options to do a quick create or a custom create. Now, this is sort of a default settings. Define one endpoint, right, which the endpoint in that case would be an application, and one WAF policy to get your front door up and running quickly. Configure advanced settings afterwards, or you can also go through all the advanced stuff from the beginning. In my example, I'm going to choose the quick create here, and I am going to go and create it here. Now I have to do, there's this one tiny little thing that I have to be aware of. That is that my let's see, that is that my subscription is almost maxed out. So I have to I have to be a little bit careful. I may run into some issues. I'm going to create an Azure front door for demonstrational purposes. I'm going to choose premium for now. Why not? The endpoint name is my Moab website, for example. Oh, that's not allowed, just Moab. And then you'll see that it will create for me sort of a generic host name, because it's going to be a public endpoint that we are connecting to in this case. So the origin type, so what am I publishing? And here you can see that we can publish all kinds of things. If you want to, you can publish a storage account or an app service or a web app or an application gateway, which is in the back, or any public IP addresses or container instances or container apps. Or so you do have quite a few options here. I'm going to choose an app service, and I am going to publish my Moab website. Then I could choose to enable caching. For now, I'm going to leave that, but I am going to create a WAF policy for this demo. I have to do the typing right. Is it? Oh, no dashes allowed. So let's do this. This will create a policy as well. Tagging, obviously, in real life, you will actually have to do the tagging, and then this will create the front door service. Now, one thing that we can say about the front door and also about the traffic manager is that because these are global components, you will not get a full solution for yourself. Microsoft is already hosting all of that stuff. You can just get your little, well, piece of the pie in that case. So the only thing you can get here is sort of a profile or an account within the already existing solution. In, let's say, load balancers and application gateways, those are resources that you can just create in your tenant, and they will be fully yours. So this is one example. In this policy, as you notice, I have, or in this front door, I actually pointed towards my MOAB website to be the publishing component. Therefore, it is pretty much doing, because of my because I chose the easy solution. It just goes and starts publishing that. It also creates a policy, a WAF pol, web application firewall policy. I'm going to go and show you that already, because that is one of these things that is done being created. If I check out my web application firewall policy here, it is connected to a front door. And then in policy settings, you can see a couple of things about error pages and the managed rules. And here we can see that this policy is already going to block certain attacks that it may recognize. You can see here, this is a long list of different kinds of attacks that we may want to go and protect our web application from. And here we already have everything that we have. This is quite nice. You can also create custom rules if you need to. You can go and say, hey, but I have certain things. For example, one of the things is, hey, if I like, for example, traffic from certain locations not to be allowed anymore, then we could do that. So, for example, well, there is obviously a couple of suspects of let's say countries that are let's say well known for their cyber attack stuff. For example, Iran and Russia is what I just selected. I can go and say block bullies. Is that a good one? Block bullies. Oh, no space allowed, of course. Here we are. Then click add, and then okay, priority 100, and then I'm going to go and click add, and now I have created an extra block from different locations. This is at this point already associated. Oh, I have to be patient. It is already associated to my Azure front door. I may want to reuse it if I have multiple front doors. You can do that as well. But that's basically what that web application firewall policy is doing, right? So my front door servers. Let me just go and open up the front door profile. Here is this one. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, anyway, that's I was not aware that I was running another one, but here we are. So this is so what we have is the front door. Here we have a front door manager, which is basically the routing component of the front door. So hey, if you are connecting to that public domain, what am I going to publish in the back? Now, one of the things that you may want to do is well, add your own custom domain. So instead of going to connect to, let's say, that interesting domain name that has been generated for me, we could now also go and say, hey man, I'm gonna, well, make sure that moab.ms in general is connecting to the front door, and then in the back we can just push whatever we like to push. That would also be a nice option. We can create some rule sets. So maybe we want to add some extra conditions, like, hey, what if we see things happening like this? So if this, then that, right? That is something we could do. Some extra, let's say, basically firewall rules we could go, and because it's layer 7, we can do some optimization things. So here we do, in this case, I have disabled caching and compression, but if you want to, you could go and say, hey, but maybe that is something that I would like to enable. So here we have a couple of options to make changes to that part. In the configuration, you just see some basic info, but this is, and we have some security-based policies, which is that web application firewall policy. From here, we can now see that we have been, that we are indeed, well, associated with a WAF policy. So if I would tell my clients, oh, that is, whoops, oh, this is weird. What did I do now? Oh, sorry, I did do something stupid. Here we are. So if I would be, yeah, so I wanted to go here actually. So I have this one here, and then let's go and say I want to go here, push that front door out, then I would still be connected to my MOAB website. That is not going to be changed. However, and that's where the cool thing happened, I am now traveling via the front door. So if I would tell DNS to push all my traffic here, then all of my traffic will be pushed via the front door, and therefore certain attacks that may happen to my web application are now being blocked because my front door is a layer 7 firewall. And this is just a, let's say, a simplistic way of, well, looking at how to publish your applications towards the internet.